Hi, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a first-person controller that could aim and shoot. Okay, so here is my sample of the finished tutorial product. This is what we're going to aim to get. I'm going to press play and show you how it works. So when I press play, the cursor gets locked to the game screen, and when I move my mouse around, I'm looking around. I move my mouse up and down, and I'm looking up and down. And you could see that in the scene window, you could see the little player, which is like that head that's moving around, and the camera is moving around with it and looking up and down, and that's my view. Okay, now when I press the fire button, which will be my mouse left button, a cannon shoots out, and the cannon shoots out basically wherever I'm looking at, wherever that X, that crosshair is pointing toward. So I'm down, and then as I move it up, the balls are shooting higher. All right, so how do we do this? That's what we're going to learn. The important objects in my scene that I have are two scripts, one for the player and one for the shot that gets shot out. And then I have my two prefabs that I made. One's the player object, which is this little head, and I made a prefab out of it. And I definitely needed to make a prefab for the shot. So if I were to just drag and drop the shot into the scene here, this is what the shot object looks like. Okay? And making a prefab is a simple thing. You kind of just drag your object from the scene and let go and drop it on your project view, and it turns something into a prefab. So if I did this and dropped it here, oops, wait a second, I lost touch with it. If I take the shot here and drag it, drop it over here into the window, bam, I just made a prefab of the shot again. So I have two prefabs of the same thing, but I already got the shot one. So I'm going to delete this one. All right, let's take a look at the player object. And you'll see that the player object has this little triangle here, meaning there's a child object inside of it. And my child object is the camera. So that's the main camera that I just dragged and I dropped it into my player object to make it a child of it. And the reason I had to do that is because I want the camera to move around with my player, so that when I'm playing the game and I move the mouse, the camera is connected to my player, rotating, looking up and down with my player. So you notice like the camera is back here, and when I press play, the camera attaches itself to the player. That's happening in the script. So let's take a look at the script over here for the player called player script. And there's some properties over here. There's the look left right speed, and I set that to 150, and there's the look up and down speed I set to 100. And then since the player is going to be shooting these little cannons, I let you be able to drag and drop what you want the prefab to be for the shot, and then I let you say how many shots you want to put into your pool of shots. Kind of like if you had a gun, how many bullets do you have in your gun? So you have like 10 cannons in your shot, so you could shoot 10 at a time. Now I'm going to double click on the player to bring us to the script for player, and here's the script. It's just the default using statements. There's no special usings for this. And inside, here's my 4 public variables that we explained on the inspector window. And privately, I have a pointer to the camera component, and I have a private array of game objects for the shots. That's so when I make my pool of shots, I have somewhere to store them. So in the start function, the first thing I do is I get a reference to the camera component, which is a child of this object. So this is referring to the player object, and then get component and children would mean anything under the triangle, directly under the triangle would be a child. And I just say to get the object that is a camera, and main camera, of course, is a camera object, so it gets that. And now I have a pointer to the camera. And then right away after I get the pointer to the camera, I just set the position of the camera to equal my player. And the camera therefore just goes right inside my player. And luckily, since the rendering of the player's material is only on one side, even though the camera is inside the player when I press play, I'm just going to press play one more time here. Even though the camera, if you look closely, is inside the head, it's inside the middle of the head, you don't see the camera, you don't see like the inside of the person's head because the inside of the capsule doesn't render anything. It only renders from the outside in. So that's how come this works. If I just place the camera directly in the middle of the head. Okay, and then the part here, this is a special command, cursor lock state, where I set it to the mode locked. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to put the mouse cursor, this little arrow, it will get locked to be within this view of the game screen, the game view, and it also will not display itself. And that's perfect because what we want to do when we're playing the game, you don't want to see the mouse anymore. I just want to use the mouse to move left and right. So I don't have to see it. And as I move my mouse, I don't want it to like move off the screen and stuff like that. So that's how come it stays locked into the game screen. Then if I want the mouse to show again like this, I just press the escape key. So let's see about the update function. The start initializes everything for the player, and the update function is going to do all the controls. So we're going to use input to read input controls from the user. So the mouse, reading the mouse movement in the x-axis, that means you're moving the mouse to the left and the right. And I set that value of whatever the movement is to mx. And then there's the mouse y, that's the axis when you move the mouse up and down. So I have when you move the mouse left and right, and when you move the mouse up and down. So what I do is I just take the values of whatever the movement is from the mouse, and I kind of put it into a vector variable because a vector has two values, and I make the first one mx and the second one my. And now that I have this look, I'm calling it look because I'm using the mouse axis to look around. Now I could scale the values that I got from the mouse input, because the values from the mouse input will only be from 0 to 1. It's going to be a very small amount of movement if I just use 0 to 1. So what I do is I multiply the values I got on the axis for mouse X and mouse Y. I multiply them so I don't have to move my mouse a whole bunch to turn around or to look up and look down. When I multiply the values, I just have to move the mouse a little bit, and my player is looking around without me moving the mouse that much. So how much do I multiply by? I scale what the values were from mx and my by look left, right, and look up, down. And scale function takes two vectors, so I just make a vector out of look left, right, and look up, down, so that I could have look now have a value that's instead of from 0 to 1 to be somewhere from 0 to 100, and I could move around faster when I look. Now, there's two directions for the look. There's looking left and right, which will be look.x, and there's looking up and down, which is look.y. So the look.y, I clamp the values of look.y to not go less than minus 65 or more than 65. I keep it like within this range. And doing this kind of is keeping my player from me just looking up, and I keep going up, and then I kind of, in my view, it's like I just did a backflip. So it keeps it when I look up, then it stops when I look at the sky, and I can't go up any further. And if I look down, it kind of stops when I'm looking at my player's feet, or chin in this case. So that's what the clamp does. So now after I get the values from the mouse input, and I set them up with a vector and I multiply the values out so they're bigger and the movement's bigger, I just take the player, and the player, I do a rotation for the X and Y. So the value of X, I rotate the player to the left and the right. And then when I go looking up and down, for that, I don't rotate the player up and down. I just rotate the camera up and down. So the player stays for the looking left and right and spins on its axis, the up axis, and then the camera will spin on its axis of which is the right axis, which means it's looking up and down. So just to explain how that looks, I mean, we saw it before. If I press play over here and I have the player selected, you could see here if I move my mouse left and right, the player is actually turning left and right. You see her eyes are looking to the left and the right. And the camera is a child of the player. So the camera is looking left and right. So there, I got my effect of looking left and right. And then for looking up and down, I just move the camera. The player kind of will stay in the same direction of looking. I don't tilt the head, I just tilt the camera. And the reason I split the rotations onto two different objects is because when I put them on the same object, it gets a little bit messy. If the head turns for a turning rotation and looks up and down for an up and down rotation, it gets a little bit more difficult to set the rotations without the head sort of spinning out of control. So this works simpler. Okay. Then here's the fire button, which that's my left mouse click as I'm showing right here. And that's when I call the DoFire function. And here's the cancel button, which is the escape key. And if I press cancel, this unlocks the mouse from being confined to the game screen and it shows itself again. Okay, so showing what this cancel button does is it undoes the effect that happened here in start when I locked the cursor and you don't see the cursor anymore. Then over here, if you press cancel, you see the cursor again and you can see it move around the screen. So that happens like this. I press play. You see how I still have a cursor here? I press play, and as soon as the game starts, the cursor disappears from view. But I can move my mouse around, you just don't see the cursor. Then if I press escape, the game is still playing, but there the cursor appears, and now when I move my cursor, it actually goes to you could see it moving on my actual computer screen, and it's coming outside of the game window. Okay, now another thing about these controls, these input controls, where do I decide to say input get axis, and where do I decide to actually put the string mouse X? How does that mean anything to Unity? How does mouse X, mouse Y, fire 1, cancel, how do those things mean anything to Unity when I put them in these functions? Now these strings are coming from somewhere, and I'll show you where I get them from. That's over here. When I go to Unity, I could check my edit project settings input, and then over here is the input manager showing up in my inspector. The input manager, it may come up for you and just show this, but you see this little triangle, click it, and it shows that there's 18 settings over here for input. Now one of the strings I had here, the first one is mouse X and mouse Y. So let's look in this input manager, and here it says mouse X and mouse Y. So this is where I'm actually getting the idea to put the string mouse X and mouse Y from this input manager. I just read it right here. And mouse X, what it equals is, I just open up this thing here, the name mouse X, which is what's showing here, and the sensitivity of movement, and here the type of movement, it reads a mouse movement, and that makes sense. This is mouse X, it should be reading a mouse movement. The other settings here are a keyboard or mouse, and then just a joystick. So this is just a mouse movement for mouse X. And then the axis of the mouse movement is, since I'm using the getAxis function, is the x-axis. The mouse has two axes, the x and the y. And joystick number, it really doesn't matter. This isn't a joystick. But if I did have this picked as a joystick, then joystick matters. But I'm doing a mouse, so it matters the name, the type is mouse movement, and the axis is X. And then for Y, you could imagine what it equals. It's mouse movement and axis Y. So there's mouse X and Y. That's where I get that from. What are the other ones I use? I use Fire 1. And Fire 1 is supposed to be the control button or the left mouse, right? So let's see, does it have Fire 1 in Input Manager? Yes, it does. It's right here. And there's the name, Fire 1. And let's see, this is a keyboard or a mouse. And keyboard or mouse button. So where do I get that it's an escape key or a, what is it? It's the escape key or the left mouse? I don't actually know. But anyway, Fire 1 is where it is, and I know it works. This input manager and these settings are the default that come with Unity. And the only other one I had was cancel. And is cancel there? Yes, it is. It's right here. And it says keyboard or mouse, joystick button 1, or the escape key. At least this one, it says the escape key. But anyway, the main thing to know is the names. If they're here, I could use them in these get axis or get button. All right, so that was the update function. And the only thing that's not here coded wise is the DoFire. So if I press the fire button, I call a separate function DoFire, just so that this function didn't have a lot of code, too much code in it. And here's the DoFire function. It just looks through my pool of shots. So I have from 0 to num shots, and I just loop through looking through all the shots. So I get the first shot at I, could be shot at 0, and I get the shot script. So I get my script of shot I. Then I see if the isHidden property is true or false, and if it's true, then that means it's hidden. I'm not using it. I could use this shot right now, and I could just say fire, all right, and I pass it some parameters. So where did the shots get pooled up? That's here in this pooled up shots function. And in the start function, here I call pool up shots. And what does pool up shots do? It just adds it adds a shot prefab to my scene. And it adds how many of them? It adds num shots of them. So first thing I do is I make an array of game objects. And how many of them? It's like num shots of them. So I make an array of, how many is it going to be? Like here it says there's 3, but I think I changed it and I overrode that value. Right here in my player, I set it to num shots equals 10. So that means when I get over here, it's going to make an array of 10 game objects. And I'm just going to have shots equal that array of 10 game objects. And then I go from 0 to 9, which is 1 less than 10. So I go from 0 to 9, that's 10 objects. And for each one, I instantiate it into the scene, which is going to, when I instantiate it into the scene, you're going to see it here in the hierarchy window. And then I give it the name shot, and I give it the number shot 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. So 2 string with the 0, 0 here, it just formats it so it always has 2 digits to it. And then I get a pointer to the script of this new shot object that I instantiated. And then I just tell the physics to ignore collision between the shot and the player. Since I don't want the shot to hit the player, I just tell the physics engine to ignore any collisions detected between the shot object and the player object. And then I tell the shot to hide itself, so you don't see it in the game. It still shows in the hierarchy window. So what this looks like here, the pool up shots when it runs, is like this. As you can see here in my hierarchy, before I run the game, there are no, well, there's this one shot that I added to show you what a prefab is, but I don't need that. I don't need any shots in the scene in the beginning. So there are no shots in the scene here, right? But when I press play, the pool shots function is going to run on the player, and as you can see, it added these shots here from shot 0, 0 to 0, 9. That's 10 shots, and here they are. And they show in the hierarchy window, but as you can see, they're not showing in the game window. When I press to shoot something, let me go back to the game window. Then when I press to shoot something, it shows in the game window. But then you see after a certain amount of time, they disappear by themselves. So when the shots disappear by themselves, that's something I did in the shot script. So let's see, let's see what we went over. This, the member variables, then we went through the function start. We went through the update function, which is basically reading controls from the user. Then I went through the pool up shots, which makes, a bunch of shots in the hierarchy window that I could shoot, but they're all hidden. And I went through this DoFire, which looks for, did I go through this? Yeah, I did. It goes through all the shots in my pool and sees which one is not being used at the moment, which one's hidden. And then it calls the shots script to fire the shot. So this is what we're going to look at next. But just before we leave the player script, there's one more thing over here called onDraw gizmos. And drawing gizmos are basically things that only show in the scene window, but not in the game window. So that just kind of helps me when I'm programming the game to see some extra information. So like when I press play over here, you're going to see in the scene window, the girl has this yellow line with a yellow ball on it. And that's just basically turning when I turn. And when I press to shoot, that ball and that line, it's just helping me know to see if the shot is going where I aimed it. And it's just something I use for debugging. And of course, since you don't see it in the game window, when the game compiles, it won't be in the game. But it just helps me know that my aiming is working. And that's what I did here. There's an event for the mono behavior, and it's called private void onDraw gizmos. And that happens like every update or something like that, that you could draw something in the scene view. So what I do is I set the gizmo color yellow, and then I draw a line from the camera forward from the camera by 2 units, and then I draw a sphere 2 units forward from the camera with a radius of 0.01, that little dot. That covers everything in the script. So now we could go to see what happens when I call the shot fire. So let me select that and say go to definition, and it'll bring us to that right here, the fire. This is the shot script, and the shot script is on the shot object, as you can see over here, the shot script. And there's no values to set. It's just a script with no values in the inspector window. There is an audio source I added, and that's the cannon sound that you hear firing off every time I press fire. So let's see what happens here. Here's the shot script. First I added some little helper objects here. This is an enumeration of show and hide. Okay, so instead of using numbers, I could use words, show and hide, to set the mode of my shot. And here's that variable, private mode. And basically, because a shot is either going to show itself on the screen, and that's when it's actually shooting, or it's going to hide itself until I press fire. So those are the 2 modes. And life of the shot is when the shot does show on the screen. Here it's saying that after 3 seconds, the shot's going to disappear. So here's the variable that controls how long it stays on the screen before it disappears by itself, whether it hits something or not. And in order to do the timing, to say like, oh, I just fired a shot, now how long has it been? Should I delete the shot? Here's the mark variable I just used to help me keep track of time. When I do the shot, I'm going to use the rigid body and add force to it. So I have to get a pointer to the rigid body component of my shot. So let me just take the shot once again and put it back in the scene again, just so we can see what the shot has here. It has a rigid body, okay? And I want a pointer to this rigid body so I could, actually shoot the shot. So I get a pointer, and I have the variable to hold it, and then I have a variable to hold the sound. So these are variables. They don't show in the inspector because they're private. This is a thing called a property. And a property is something that I don't call it like a function. I don't put like the brackets around it. I could just say, shot script dot is hidden. And what this does is it returns to me the value of hide. or show. So a property like this, I'm using this in the player script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all the places this is referenced, find all references. And you could see over here in the player script, player.cs, when I have the script of the shot, I say the script of the shot dot is hidden equals true. And that's how a property works. Okay, it's just the value, and I could check for it or set it. And here I just have the get, so that means I could just get the value. If I wanted to have a set, I have to have another thing called set with the two brackets. Anyway, it's a get. Okay, not too complicated. Then we have the start function. So this happens basically when I instantiate the shot. This start function is going to happen from the player script right here when I'm pulling up shots. Like right when I say shot instantiate, the shot gets added to the scene. The start function is going to happen. I get a pointer to the rigid body. I get a pointer to the sound for the cannon sound. And then I do hide shot. Okay, hide shot is just basically going to turn off the collider, and it's going to turn off the renderer. Turning off the collider means nothing can hit it. Things will just pass right through it in the scene. And turning off the renderer means the shot will not be drawn in the game window, in the scene. Those two things basically hide the shot. Then I just set the mode to hide. All right, so that's what start function does. Then update is just going to check for how long the shot's been alive, how long the shot's been showing. So first thing I got to make sure is the shot is showing. So showing would be, if it's hidden, this returns true. So if it's not hidden, what is it? It's the other thing. It's showing. So if not hidden, that's what this exclamation mark means, not hidden. And time, the current time minus the time that I marked, this will give me how much time has passed, is greater than life, then hide the shot again. Right? So that means like over here, I press play, I press the shot fire button. Boom, the shot is visible. And then it hides itself by itself. So it's visible, and then after a certain amount of time passes, it hides itself. So that thing is happening right here in the code with the update function. The time minus the mark time is life. And mark time is set like when I fire the shot and I say show shot. That's when I take the mark time, whatever the current time is. It's 33. And then as time goes on, an update function is getting called, and now time is 33, 34, 35, 36. Then 36 minus 33 will be greater than 3, and I turn the life off. I turn off the shot. So let's see what we went through. The variables, the property is hidden. Then the start function, the update function, checking the time to see if it hides or not. And this is hiding the shot, which turns off the collider and the renderer and sets the mode to hide. And this is the show shot, which turns on the collider and the renderer and sets the mode to show. And then right when I set it to show, I set the mark time, so I know just from when I showed it to show that it'll turn off. So here's the fire function. And fire is called from, let me just see, find all references. It's called right here from the player script. Remember when I press the fire key, it calls DoFire. So it's called from right here in the player script. And fire, it takes the camera, it takes how far in front, it takes the speed of the shot, and how long the shot should be alive for. So how long the shot should be alive for, I set my member variable life to how long the shot should be alive for when I call it in the function. And I think my player script, I set it for 3 seconds, but it's a way I could control it from the player script. So this will still equal 3. Then I do a show shot, which is going to show it in the game and turn on the collider and stuff. And then I got to position the shot. So I position this, which is the shot, because the script is connected to the shot object. I position the shot right where the camera is, plus a little bit forward in the camera. And how much forward? Whatever this says. And what does it say over here? I set it to 1, right? So 1 unit in front of the camera. And the camera, remember, is inside my player. So that means the shot, when you look at it, when I press the gun button, when I shoot, you see how it starts just a little bit in front of my head. Okay? So that's the position. And then after I set the position, after it's in the right place, then I just add, I set the velocity of the shot. I give it some speed. In what direction do I give that speed? What direction do I give it velocity? In the direction of camera forward. See, and that's how it works, that whichever way I'm looking here in the game, that camera forward, if it's up, if it's down, that's the camera forward, and that matches it up with the line of where the camera's looking. And then I just multiply that by speed. And speed, you can see here, was a parameter that comes in. So my speed in the player was set to 10. The bigger you set this number, the more speed you're going to have. And the lower you set that number, the less speed you're going to have, the less the cannonball is going to travel. And then the only other thing, after I position the camera, after I position the cannon ball and make the cannonball move, is to play that sound of the cannonball. Okay? So this is the shot script, and I'll just show it one more time and scroll through it slowly. Here's my enumeration for mode. These are my variables. This is that property is hidden, and there's a get to it. This is the start function, which initializes some stuff and hides a shot. This is the update function, which checks to see how much time the shot has been on the screen, and then it takes it off. This hides the shot. This shows the shot. And then I have the fire command, which shows a shot, sets the life, positions your shot, and moves the shot forward to place the sound. Okay? And the player script, I think we went through it, but I'll just go show it one more time. The player script has these member variables: start function, update function to read the controls from the user, pool up shots to get a bunch of shots into the scene, and then hides them all. Then DoFire is like what happens if you press the fire button. It calls DoFire, and this looks for a available shot and fires it. And then onDrawer Gizmos is just to draw that yellow line in the scene window for helping debug. So those are the scripts. All right, for the third part of this tutorial, I'm actually going to do the whole shot scene from scratch, or almost from scratch, in a new scene. So here I have a new scene, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the floor. So that's basically a cube. And I think what I'll do is I'll just make the floor 30 by 30. There you go. And set the height at 0, 0, 30, 30. That's my floor. So let me just name that floor. And then I'm going to get the texture for the floor was this ground. I already have the material here. I'll just drag and drop the material for floor there. Okay. So I got the floor. Now I'm going to add a player. So I'm going to create a capsule for my player, the capsule shape. Pick it up above the floor a little bit. And then I have the material for the player was this lady's head. And I would just drag and drop it onto the capsule to make that head texture. So I call this the player. Now, one curious thing is like, how the heck did I get a texture that just wraps around like a head? What I did was I just went on Google, basically, and for Google I did a search for face texture, and then I just wanted to see the images from the results, and that brings up a couple of faces here. So just for example, this face texture was the one of this girl here, which is, I think it's like right here, it's this one. So you see how they look very weird as a flat image, but they wrap around pretty well and you get the image of the face. So let's just see, what does it look like with this one. Let's try this one over here just so you can see. So I take this image and I download it to my desktop. So I say save image as, I save it to my desktop, and there you go, there's the image. Then I kind of drag and drop the image into my Unity project. Here it is. Then I drag and drop it onto the player object, and there it is. So first when I drop it on, it looks like he's looking to the side, but this blue arrow is the front. This is the forward of my game object. So I want the face to look forward. So I just select the player object, which I am, and I go here to the material for it, and I could do offset, and I could play around with the X. So I could just drag the X offset of this image until his face is looking forward, okay? So things like 0.25 would be nice. There, and now the texture is mapped and his face is looking right where the forward direction is of the object, okay? And that's how I kind of get these textures for the thing. See, now I have the material of this guy's head. Let's stick with that material for his head. The other thing with the player, so this is going to be first person point of view. Just going to drag the camera and make it a child of the player. So good, that's the first step there. I got the player object. Then, I showed you how to make the scripts. So I'm just going to take the player script and add it to the player object. So let me see. I don't have to see all those details about the text, the shader. Now I could say add component, and it's a script that exists, and it's the player script. So this adds it to there. And now that I add the player script, it wants to know what? It wants to know what the shot prefab is. All right, we'll get that in a moment. So the shot prefab, there's one here, but we're doing everything from the beginning again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new one. So I'll say game object create a sphere. All right. So, excuse me. The shot is a little bit big there. I'm just going to shrink it down a little, use a scale, and make the shot more reasonable size. And so the shot's not just plain old white. Once again, I could just go to Google and I could type in, I don't know, rusty texture, something rusty metal looking. And, whatever. That'll be good enough if I just use one of these guys. Like, hey, I'm interested in this one. So let me click it and then save it to my desktop. Here's my desktop, save that face there, good. Now I just drag and drop the texture into my scene and drag and drop the texture onto the object, boom. Now it's mapped. The only thing is a little bit smooth. So say I want it to be a little bumpier, have some like, bumps to it. So I'm just gonna select my texture in the scene and press Control D to duplicate it. And this one I'm gonna use as the normal. So I'm gonna look over here in the inspector, and first I had to select it, the texture. Then I look in the inspector and I change the texture type to normal map, and I use grayscale, and I turn it a little bit down from 2 to, just like less than 1, and I use the smooth mapping. Then I say apply, and you see this thing kind of turns blue. Now I go back to the sphere, and here in the inspector I look at the shader for the sphere, and I kind of pick the normal map, and I have to pick the right one. So what was it called? Download one? It's right here, download one. And you see the sphere, if I look closer, it got a little bumpy, right? So, that worked. So now I could play around with the bumpiness. If I want, I could select this normal map thing and play around with the bumpiness. Like, I can make it totally as bumpy as possible. And you see how it gets really, really bumpy. Or I could turn it down a little more. And, I get just a couple of bumps. You play around with that. But anyway, now I got my sphere, and what is it going to be? It's basically my ball that I'm going to shoot. So I'm just going to call this one ball. And then I got to turn it into a prefab. So I drag and drop my ball object here into my project window. And boop, there we go. I got a prefab. Okay, so now I go back to I don't need the ball in the scene anymore. Well, there's something missing. My player, I select my player and shot prefab. I'm just going to drag and drop that. I'm going to use this ball for my shot. Okay, so now the player has everything it needs. Now let me go back to the ball because I have a script for the shot right here, and the ball is going to be a shot. So I could add the shot as my script. I could just drag and drop it. That's another way. And it doesn't take any parameters. Okay, so now my shot has a script. This is in my hierarchy window. Let me just make sure I press apply so that my prefab is updated to match. Okay, and then I probably could just get rid of this, delete. Let me just check, does my prefab have the script? Yeah, it has a script, good. It has a sphere collider, and the only thing it's missing is a rigid body. So let me add a rigid body in the physics section. Rigid body, where are you? Right there. Bam. Okay. All right, now I have the rigid body. I got the script, and that's the prefab right there that I was setting. Got that. Got my player. I wonder what's going to happen if I press play. Let me zoom out on my scene view a little. Let me press play, and it looks like I could look around. Can I shoot? Yep, I could shoot. There's no sound. I didn't add sound yet, but I am shooting. And there's no X that marks the spot. So how do I do the X that marks a spot? Basically, what I do is I add a canvas image element. So I go to my hierarchy window, game object, UI, image, and there's this little white box. And over here, I press the Alt key on my keyboard, and then I click the mouse, and now I say center, and it comes out in the center. Okay. Now we don't want a white box. We want that little crosshair. We want the crosshair. So let's kind of go back to Google here, and I just typed in crosshair transparent, and I got all these different crosshairs. And I want a transparent one. So basically, I could pick one of these guys, and if it comes up with these checker box gray and white boxes, this is a transparent. So let me save this image to my desktop again, and I could leave it whatever name it has, save. Okay. Now I take this thing, drag it into my scene, and it looks like this. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to use this image on this canvas image element. So I have to change it from the default to a sprite 2D UI. And I press apply. And you can see now it has a transparency and everything. So this thing's ready. Now I go to my canvas image, I select the image, and you can see here it wants a source image. So I'm going to take this and drag and drop it right there, and bam, I have my crosshair. You could control the size of it if you want. I think two ways. Is it this? No, this doesn't do it. It's right here. See, I could control the scale. I went minus. Let me see if it's 1. I could say 0.5, and then in the 0.5, and now it's like smaller. Maybe like 0.75 and 0.75. So in case your crosshair is too big or too small, you could play around there and make it bigger or smaller. Now I have a crosshair in the middle, right? Now let's see if everything's there. I press play. Boom. Got my crosshair. I shoot. Oh, I can only shoot 3 shots. Why? That's because over here in num shots I have 3, but I could change that to whatever. I could change it to 20 if I want. Okay, and now I can shoot more shots at a time. Pew 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 pew. The other thing is I'm making a pew pew sound with my mouth, but the game was supposed to make a sound. So let's do that. Let's add the ball. It doesn't have an audio for sound, so I'm going to go back to the ball and I'm going to add an audio component, an audio source. We're right there. And all I got to do is drag my cannon sound right there on the audio clip and turn off play on awake. Now, if I press play, there we go. We made the same thing from scratch. And this completes my entire tutorial. There you go, have fun.